Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the PB Political Podcast. I'm Eshan Pokhrel,
I'm Michael Bodeker.
and we are here today recapping the 2024 vice presidential debate that was held on Tuesday, October 1st, between Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. The general consensus, I guess, leaving this debate was I wish that these were the candidates. We definitely got to return to civil debates, a lot of substance, maybe a little bit more boring for the average viewer, but also at the same time, much more actual substance being discussed, and very spotty moderators, but definitely better than they didn't have to rein in a wild card like Donald Trump or anybody counteracting him. So yeah, overall thoughts, Bodeker, what did you think?
It was weird. It was in our entire political lives have been spent in this crazy debate era. So it's weird to kind of see obviously I have memories of the Romney Obama debates as a child, and then I don't really think I remember any of the McCain Obama debates. I just not quite old enough and didn't really care enough at 5 years old to care. But this one was really interesting because it was whoa, they're agreeing with each other sometimes. It's crazy. I thought that was really...
Yeah, and we're back. We had a little bit of a snafu there, but yeah.
I bet on that one. I thought it was really interesting how there was just a lot of agreement, and I think that actually the Vance Walz debates, I think, kind of symbolize a lot of where American society is in terms of, I think that writ large, I think American society agrees that there are a lot of problems. Obviously, in the Trump world, he has a completely different approach to the problems. But I think the cool part I think the Vance Walz debates show that our society really does have a lot. We all agree that there are a lot of problems, and there are two completely different worldviews on how to solve those problems. But now, credit to Vance and Walz because they handled it like adults and pretty maturely, and they shook hands. There was no, that wasn't a big deal for them. Obviously, when Trump debates now, it's a huge deal. Will they shake hands? It's did we, I don't even think I considered, that wasn't even a question.
I think, yeah, I agree.
They're apologizing to each other too.
They were very cordial.
How his son witnessed a shooting, and Vance was I had no idea. I'm so sorry. It's whoa.
It was a very
compassion? No shot.
Yeah, it was a very cordial debate. I think getting into a little bit more of the actual results, I think J.D. Vance definitely won in the sense that J.D. Vance is now somebody that people think is not a really robotic, crazy dude. And he really showed that he actually is. There's a reason he's a senator. There's a reason he was elected to the U.S. Senate. There's a reason his book was super popular and blew up all over the country. He showed that first he was just a better debater. I don't think Tim Walz was ready for the stage. He also had said in the past he wasn't comfortable debating, so I think that wasn't lying. That was him being honest about that, which is fair enough. He did grow into the night, I think, pretty well. But yeah, J.D. Vance definitely came off as the better candidate just because I think the biggest thing that if you're a Republican that's maybe tired of Trump but likes the policy, the MAGA idea, I think J.D. Vance is the perfect vehicle to move that forward, it looks like, after this debate, because two things stuck out to me. So one positive, one negative. I'll start right now. I think his abortion answer was really good because he was able to not only concede the fact that Republicans are not popular on abortion, and in fact, J.D. Vance personally himself has the most hardline view on abortion as a Catholic, but which is that he thinks abortion should be federally banned. But then, when he came back in his answer, he was yeah, my home state of Ohio has a more liberal position on abortion, and it was one that I don't agree with it, but the voters passed it, and I have to respect that. And that, I thought that was interesting because if you're going to be a GOP who's on the wrong side of issues like abortion, you need to be honest with where you are, and you need to be able to find a way to you can't just be chasing a national abortion ban or whatever for the next 50 years like they did with Roe v. Wade. It's just not popular. It's not going to last. It's not going to stay. It's never going to become law, most likely. So
Trump,
I think that was
Trump said after the debate, I think that he would veto it. He said like right after the debate, he said he would veto it.
Yeah, and remember he couldn't say that on the debate stage, which was shocking to both of us. Yeah, and I think that was really just shows that he finally, more than anything, probably saw that was the right way to message it. And JD Vance has been saying that, which is, again, I think I commend him because he's been very upfront about personally being like for a federal ban. So I think that was a big point. And then the second part, though, I think JD Vance was very. I think he was as good as he could have been, but still awful on his January 6th answer. I think that he was really backed to a corner because you have one hand, you have obviously Trump lost the election. And he said it at some point earlier in the debate that Biden is legally like the president, but he didn't come back and clarify. Because on the other side of that coin, of him clearly losing the election, you can't say that to when your boss's only driving conviction is that you were cheated out of an election, allegedly. So I think that was a really tough line to walk, and I was honestly surprised that they didn't bring it up earlier. Like Tim Walz or something didn't find a way to bring it up earlier. But I think that's the main soundbite of the night. But I was very impressed by JD Vance. I mean, I knew he was going to be a good debater. He's pretty well known to like, be on the Hill answering questions about like policy for like a long time. He's like, he's a policy nerd. So it was a refreshing debate. I think Tim Walz did a good job of articulating his point of view outside of the China answer, which was I don't know what was going on there. I don't know. He's a knucklehead. Yeah, I guess he is. We could talk about that to start off with. But yeah, that was my.
I was just gonna say that like this debate, like you and I have talked about it, like the kind of the one-liners, the zingers that we're used to from both Trump and the anti-Trump. Mm-hmm. Like Trump with like the you'd be in jail, or like Biden in 2020, like with like the will you shut up, man? And then like with Kamala Harris, like gosh, it was the last debate, and I forgot what that I'm talking now, or and it's like we're used to those one-liner like petty zingers, and this debate didn't have that. There were a couple of times where like we just talked about the China answer where I think JD Vance could have said something snarky to kind of like a gotcha moment at Tim Walz there. He didn't. Tim Walz really didn't do this like that either with JD Vance's January 6th answer. Kind of when both candidates gaffed or kind of made a mistake, the other just didn't give them a crazy petty response on it. They just kind of acknowledged it and went along, and that was weird because I think we're used to that like hostile and petty environment. So it's really weird, and I think you're right too. I think Vance won. I don't think, like, if I had to give it out of 10, I would say that Walz was probably a 6.5. And I would say that Vance was probably closer to an 8. I think Vance did a really good job of pitching basically what MAGA should be to the average person way better than I think Trump does it. Because I think anybody that kind of keeps up with the MAGA movement, or at least, Republicans, I think, he resonates with a lot of people and gets a lot of people involved, but I think he also isolates a lot of people that Vance, I think, may have been a little bit more successful in bringing back to here's what we want to accomplish and marketing that in a way that Trump just can't.
I absolutely think that, this was definitely a better. I think JD Vance, honestly, I'm going to give him a 9 just because his January 6th answer was awful. But the saving grace on that is that it happened so late in the debate that the likelihood is that most viewers were not tuned in. Now, that being said, the Harris campaign is already running ads with that clip, and then Tim Walz's fall. I think he said that the quote was like, "That is a damning non-answer." I think that was like the one-liner we got all day, but it was good. It works. I mean, like they got what they needed from this debate, but I think overall JD Vance did a really good job. I was impressed by his ability to really package MAGA into a much more into what 2016 MAGA was if Trump wasn't like the sensationalist person that he is. That's really what the core message of MAGA was, and I think JD Vance truly does believe that iteration of it. But now it's just kind of been exported into like the future. So I think he's a much more effective messenger than Trump. I think Tim Walz is a much more effective messenger than Kamala Harris. I do wish this was the matchup. I think there'd be a lot more. I think it'd just be better overall. I think there'd be more. I think there'd be more of these debates. There'd be more interviews. It would just be a lot better. And
I think to clarify too is like I don't think anyone actually lost this debate. Like even though I would give Vance better than Walz, I don't think Tim Walz necessarily lost. Like I guess on a technicality because I said Vance won, that Tim Walz lost. I don't necessarily think though that like he performed well. It's not that he was a disaster. He started off a bit shaky, and I think people are kind of giving him some memes about it on the internet. But you know, I don't think that that's too unrelatable. I think a lot of people would be nervous. I mean, that's the biggest moment of his political career, and obviously Vance handled it a little bit better. But you know, it was just I don't think that Tim Walz lost, and I don't think that like I think Vance may help Trump a little bit. I don't think it'll be hugely statistically significant, and I don't think that Walz hurt Harris either.
No, not at all. I don't. Yeah.
If somebody gets bumped here, I think Trump may get bumped up. You know, half a point. But who knows? Half a point in Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin or Nevada or even Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona. Even races like that we're seeing that could be more competitive now. Like obviously Texas will go red by probably 5 points to 8 points. Florida, but you know, if Vance can help carry, especially candidates down ballot where Republicans are really really struggling, then I think that would be. Then that's a win. That's a huge debate. And honestly, now I think Trump won't want to debate again because Vance is he's kind of wrapped everything up in a pretty bow. And if Trump debates again, then there's a chance that he unravels that. And that sour image is what voters go into Election Day with and not this polished Vance image.
Trump definitely, if Trump was to debate, which he clearly doesn't want to, if he was to debate, he definitely would make it worse. I agree. I don't think he's a good messenger, especially at this state of his life, frankly. He's not the successful messenger he was in 2016 and 2020. I agree. I don't think Tim Walz won it. I guess I didn't give him a rating. I think he did he did good. I was pleasantly surprised that we didn't have a debate that was really just toxic because we haven't seen a debate that nuanced and substantive. They're talking about CBP1 apps. JD Vance talking about immigration applications on the debate stage.
The Walz corrected the moderator on that. They both up against the moderator.
It's crazy. It's just a really refreshing thing, I think, more than anything, just for the country. Unfortunately, it's not. It's the vice presidential debate, not the presidential. But it was definitely good, and I think Walz did really well to recover from that first answer, which I don't even think was that bad. I think the image that people are going to get from Walz, who, again, is super popular, I think is the most popular of all four, Harris, Trump, Walz, and Vance. I think rightly so. I think he just kind of has that vibe. I think the general impression was he just new to this, and he did pretty well. I didn't think he did bad at all. But they're very cordial, and yeah. So one thing, just viewership wise, the viewership ratings have come out. So the vice presidential debate draws over 43.15 million viewers. It's Nielsen ratings. That's a drop from 2020, which was 57 million, which is way higher than I thought. But also, I think being COVID, I don't think there's too much of a comparison there. At the same time, I'm trying to remember what the Trump and Harris debate was. It was very high, right? It was 67 million-ish. I think 67 million. So 67 million for Harris and Trump. So not too much of a delta. Not as much, about what I'd expect. I think it's definitely good. Not an awful ratings, but definitely means a lot of people are watching that. But also, everyone's gonna see the clips, and I think the clips people are gonna see, and we can talk about more of the substance now, is Tim Walz's China answer, maybe JD Vance's January 6th answer, and then probably both abortion answers. Where do you want to start?
Let's start from the beginning, I guess, with Tim Walz and China.
Let's do it.
I guess that's probably a good one.
So you go
ahead and start while I find this.
Yeah, to set it up, this was kind of a newer revelation, sort of. I think it kind of broke into the general public a couple of days ago. So Tim Walz went to China multiple times on public goodwill trips. I'm not really sure, volunteering, community service, things like that, and. In an interview or in a campaign stop, he said that he was in China during in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989, I believe, right? And so That wasn't true. He was in Tiananmen, or he was in Hong Kong, I think in August, I think it was in August of the year. So
August
Tiananmen Square was in the summers, June or July, I think, and then he was in China in August of the same year, and he had equivalent. He said that he was in China during the event itself, and then so that just kind of spread on social media, and then you can hear Tim Walz was confronted with this question pretty early on by the moderators. And yeah, what do you say, Bodeker? What happened?
Well, I think the line that kind of got this was, I think the people are going to take away is that I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. And he's talking about being working for his community and whatever, and he kind of obfuscated a little bit, but I think that he did say that I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. And then he goes on the attack about Trump and China and praising President Xi for his COVID response. So I don't think that, look, at the end of the day, how good can you really answer? Like, it's the same thing with J.D. Vance in January 6th. We'll talk about how effective of an answer can you give when you're called out on a lie that, it is kind of hard to kind of be publicly, obviously, it's easy to own it, right? Like, it is easy to own it. And Walz kind of owned it. So I give him credit for that. But, there's only so good of an answer that you can give when you're called out on something that you just kind of obviously lie about and it gets exposed. So
I don't even...
Oops. It's an unforced error, but, at the end of the day, he put it on himself by claiming that, so...
Exactly. I don't even think it's that big of a deal, honestly. It's funny. It's like him telling a tall tale, and just fits the character of Tim Walz being a Midwestern dude who's just a guy that's a governor and happens to become possibly the next vice president. I think it just kind of fits. He did own up to it.
It's not a big deal. I don't think so. I don't care when Tim Walz was in China. I just don't.
I don't care
honestly,
either,
you don't want your politicians to lie, but that's kind of in the job description, I think, at this point. So.
It was funny though, what he should have said. There was a moment where he said that he said that I misspoke on this. He should have stopped his answer there at the second part. I think that was kind of a lack of experience coming through. Just say you misspoke, move on with it. I don't think it's a big deal unless it turns out that the CIA or something was grooming him by sending him to China, which would be kind of funny. But I don't think...
honestly, let's be real. I feel like this is going to be one of those things where he was I was in China around the time of the Tiananmen Square protests, and he ended up,
he basically just
saying that he was there during it when obviously it was a little bit after, but
it's whatever,
I'm sure that initially it was just, I was there around the time. Obviously, we took a trip to Europe this summer and we were there for, soccer during there, but we could have said, we
were there
if we weren't there, we could have said that we were there. And
we were there for the French, we were there for the French elections or something like that. It's just
Yeah.
One thing that one thing they should have mentioned more, I think one thing they absolutely should talk about more was Hurricane Helene, which has been absolutely wiped off the map by media. I don't know how there's been absolutely no real coverage of this. It's absolutely brutal.
The deadliest storm and costliest storm, I think, since Katrina.
It's been absolutely insane. The state of North Carolina, the western part of North Carolina,
Eastern Tennessee,
North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina. It's been absolutely brutal. And there was this thing that was floating around the internet yesterday. A lot of people were reposting it. FEMA is $9 billion. FEMA has been short on funding for this, and it's coincides with the United States sending another $100 billion to Israel, money to Ukraine. It's just and I think that should be getting a lot more attention. That's why I kind of brought it up today, because they were asked a question on Helene, but it kind of just, and I think they both gave great answers. I think J.D. Vance being from literally about the area, not necessarily the area, but Appalachia itself. Obviously, it's kind of, Helene's crazy because Asheville has been basically just obliterated. Boone has been obliterated. Two big North Carolina cities in the Appalachians, which is in that same tract that J.D. Vance is from. He definitely has a lot of cultural ties to the area. They gave great answers. Both of them had good answers on this. I just don't understand how this wasn't talked about more. I don't understand. It makes no sense to me. Not how the media hasn't talked about it more, but it's been absolutely brutal over there, and we hope everybody does well and stays safe. Yeah. But yeah, it's just it was funny because I saw like the split screen of, I think they the first question the moderators asked was basically, would you start a war in the Middle East? They were like, would you preemptively strike Iran? Like, what is that even like? That's first thing. That's an awful question. Second thing, why don't you ask something about like, would you condition aid? Would you not like? Let's not ask the craziest question. Also, you're the vice president, so like, I mean, what can you really do? But I don't know. I think the lack of discussion of Hurricane Helene and the lack of discussion of the longshoreman strike, two events that could legitimately swing the election domestically, not even to mention the Middle East. The lack of time spent on those was a little disappointing, especially because the moderators kept saying we have a lot of things to get to, a lot to discuss, which pissed me off, frankly, just because that's the reason why they try to silence, they cut the mics on both.
And shout out to both Vance and Walz, by the way, for kind of teaming up on the moderators. We usually it's just Trump going after the moderators, but honestly, both Vance and Walz were like, what are you guys doing?
I think it's a lack of pressure on them because they aren't the presidential candidates. Maybe they're just they want to talk about issues, and maybe that's just them. I think that is just kind of them rather than them being playing into the role of VP. But the moderators, maybe I don't like the moderators. I thought they did an okay job, but honestly, kept saying we have lots to talk about, we have lots to discuss. Can we move on? Was just very, especially when you're having conversations about stuff that people really want to hear. Was very off-putting.
I give the moderators a C minus to C. I don't think that they were the worst things ever. I don't think that they were by any means good.
Yeah, they're definitely better than some have been in the past, but absolutely
the ABC
not
ones
great.
I would give a D or a D.
Yeah, I don't think they did a good job. Okay, so we talked about that. Is abortion next, right? So abortion,
yeah,
maybe the social issue of definitely the social issue of the election. And I think Tim Walz started on this question, and he started with, Democrats they're just better on this issue, which frankly, he started talking about the very admittedly more rare side, the outlier cases that are awful in themselves, but just things about abortions in Texas. I think it was Amanda Zaworski, and then the lady in Kentucky, what's her name? Hadley Duvall, I think was her name.
Yeah.
So is her name. So two cases where abortions were not able to be provided, or provided late, and then life altering consequences came in after because of that. So yeah, and I think Tim Walz is a good messenger on this. He's done a lot in Minnesota for, I guess, if you're a super pro-choice advocate, then Tim Walz is a pretty solid governor on this issue.
Best, probably.
Maybe the best. Tim Walz, and I do have to give Tim Walz credit. The amount of stuff that he's passed, whether I agree with it or not, with a 1-seat majority in Minnesota is absolutely incredible. It's just that's so much and a lot of it is good. I think a lot of it is positive. A lot of it's somewhat negative, but with a 1-seat majority in the state of Minnesota, he's gotten a lot done, good or bad, in his terms. So I think that's a positive for him. But yeah, he has a lot of credentials for the conversations like abortion. You can tell that he definitely didn't want to talk about foreign policy. And he's a governor. It makes sense, right? He doesn't have a really leg to stand on foreign policy. So yeah, I think the biggest he did a good job on abortion. J.D. Vance's answer was more interesting, I think, just because we've heard the Tim Walz answer. We've never heard J.D. Vance's answer from anybody in the Republican Party. That's at least in a position like his. And yeah, Bodeker, you want to walk through what J.D. said on abortion?
Yeah, honestly, J.D. Vance, I remember we did I think it was the Biden-Trump debate a few months ago when I said that Trump gave the best answer that Trump has ever given on abortion. Then obviously the one that he gave against Kamala Harris in their debate was worse.
Yeah.
I think the one that Trump gave with Biden, I think, was honestly a 10. Obviously it's Trump articulating it, so you kind of have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But for him, I thought that was about the best answer he could have given.
That's the best he could have done. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the one against Kamala Harris, I think, was a 7. Like, he kind of articulated it a little bit. Like, he could have just said the same thing, honestly.
Well, that was the one where he said that he wouldn't veto. He said that a national abortion. I think that made it bad because like he just. I don't know what that calculus for context.
But he was just obfuscating for no reason when the answer that he gave beforehand was perfectly fine. So you're right. I think I maybe have overrated that answer. But then obviously J.D. Vance here, I think gives probably also maybe a 10 answer. Like, I think this is probably, and I think that is the position of most of the GOP is, like he says that a lot of Americans don't agree with everything he's ever said. I think a lot of pro-life people probably feel that way because they are the minority. And, you know, he says that he knows someone that very near and dear to him that had an abortion. And so he obviously is not, you know, in a stage of his life where he can just kind of cancel everybody who in his life who is pro-choice. And I think he understands that. But he basically goes into he wants the Republicans to be pro-family, supporting fertility, so like IVF. That was a big issue at one point. Make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I think that will resonate with suburban women specifically, but also even like people in high cost of living areas, so like Californians and women in New York. So I think that's a good answer as well. Make it easier for young families to afford a home. That's a big deal. Obviously, it's not a super big abortion one, but then it gets to the the actual answer, which is the country is big, the country is diverse. People in Georgia view abortion differently than people in California do, and that's fine. It's democracy. And honestly, I respect that. And he gets into talking about how Ohio had their own referendum that like he says, you know, he never supported a national ban, but he did talk about setting a minimum national standard, so not an outright ban, but like a 15-week ban. Nationally, I don't think J.D. Vance would probably vote for it, but I don't know if he necessarily supports it. But obviously, he talked about how Ohio had an abortion referendum, voted overwhelmingly against how J.D. Vance voted. But he's talking about how Republicans need to improve their messaging on this because honestly, a lot of their stances on it aren't super radical. It's just they have to actually communicate the way that they want it across and not let, you know, the radicals on the issue in their party dictate the entire party's platform. Exactly. I think that they could have a very rational position on it. And sometimes I think the radicals prevent them from doing so and make it harder for them to appear rational.
I think they've done that a little bit, and I agree fully. I think they did that a little bit with like LGBTQ plus language in the platform. Trump just completely eliminated anything, which I think is a positive. I don't think it should be something that should be talked about at all. It doesn't really matter. So I think that quietly did that during the convention, I believe, which I think is a step in not letting the radicals dictate your party. Exactly. This is the same thing. I think it's been the pro-life movement in the Republican Party and in conservative circles has had their way of things for 50 years, and it's frankly just time for them to become another interest group. I mean, there's a lot of interest groups on the Republican side that don't get the time of day that probably should. And I think pro-life, I mean, if you were pro-life for the last, 50 years, then your whole thing was let's overturn Roe v. Wade. That's what you said, at least. And that's what President Trump did. And then now they're like, oh, let's keep pushing. But now it's like, your time is over. You're not in the majority. It's not going to happen.
Now you fight for it in your own states. It's beautiful.
Now you do it yourself.
That was the whole point.
That was the whole point. That's the whole point of federalism. So I think J.D. Vance's answer, I think that's not only the best answer on abortion I've seen somebody in the Republican Party that's in this high of a level give. I think it's probably going to be the standard moving forward. And I actually like that he finally kind of expounded on what pro-family policy means. I haven't seen Vivek Ramaswamy talked about this a lot during the campaign. He didn't really expound on what that actually meant. Basically, and he hit the high points, like fertility treatments, make it easier to moms to afford to have babies. J.D. Vance is one of the leading Republican senators who supports a child tax credit. Probably one of the only Republican senators, honestly, that supports it, and that's just because he's just a different type of Republican, right? It's just he's a very populist guy. So I think just having a couple bullet points there was definitely a positive. I do still think Tim Walz wins the issue just because, I mean, you can't lose the issue if you're Tim Walz, who actually has credibility on abortion, and also your party just wins the issue in every state. Kansas voted to keep abortion. I mean,
Well, and the thing is, too, is right. I don't think Walz is bound by his radicals in the same way that Vance is. Like, I think if you really give...
That's definitely not true. No, that's definitely true. Sorry, it's definitely true.
Like, if you give, the average, I think, American, you give them either, like, the most radical pro-life or the most radical pro-choice. Like, basically, like Trump said, like the Ralph Northam of Virginia, like, the execute after birth. Like, I think that it's the average person is much more, they're not as affected by the critiques of like 9-month, like abortions, which however bad those may be. And I think most people agree that they're pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Versus like not at all. I think that people don't see the 9-month as bad as the total ban. Which hurts Vance and obviously helps Walz because his position's already seen as more rational anyway. And Vance also is not like he's not crazy on this issue. I think that a lot of Republicans and even some moderates probably feel that way, but the political climate just is better for Walz on that. It just is.
And I think it's a good, if you're going to win any swing voters on abortion, like this is my thing, and I think I've said this in the past, like Trump could go, there's like 2 or 3 issues Trump could just like embrace fully, and honestly, it wouldn't lose him any vote share. Going much more pro-Trump, I think we both Trump is pro-choice. Him embracing it has kind of become a thing now, I think, but the thing is, him embracing that isn't going to lose him any votes. I think that him just like going full turn on like Israel Palestine wouldn't actually lose many votes, because in the end, who are they going to vote for? I mean, actually, they could vote for Kamala Harris, but they wouldn't have voted for Joe Biden in the same scenario because of the way that
the thing is now, right? Like theoretically, like with the way the law works after Dobbs, it really doesn't matter what your federal candidates' positions on abortion are anyway.
But it does. It doesn't matter. It
does, but like it maybe I'm just arguing that it shouldn't because
it shouldn't.
They're not
No, it definitely shouldn't.
On it now.
It absolutely shouldn't. I agree. I think because it doesn't matter. You're right. It doesn't actually matter. What matters is the state vote. But people it's still going to be like top of mind, right? So yeah. I mean, and also you have abortion.
It will be probably for a few more years.
Yeah.
I think that maybe 2028 it will cool down by then.
Hopefully, I think it'll be good because people
Well, I think just in the Trump era, maybe I think that it fires up people on certain hot button issues, and I think this is one of them.
Yeah.
So I think maybe with Trump gone, I think abortion also will probably go with Trump.
Maybe, and the best thing is, like, I actually think Dobbs was like, oh, this is gonna be. I'm saying it publicly. Dobbs is actually the right decision because, in the one sense,
no, I agree.
You have to pay attention to your state legislature now. And I think there's a lot of issues like education, like Department of Education is like a big conservative, like should we get rid of it? I mean, you might have to, the resources will go to the states and then you just pay attention to your state legislature. So there's a lot of, the federalism is kind of easing back in after 2001. I think since 9/11 it's kind of been like concentrated. Hopefully this is a shift back to more of like federalism centric model, which is what we're founded on.
Well, that's what we're talking, you talked about too, like with federalism, like maybe my personal opinion, but I think the 17th Amendment, the direct election of senators, should be re-looked into. And, maybe you don't go back to the original model of both nominated by state legislature. Maybe you have one popular vote and you have one state legislature. That's a conversation, but,
there's a lot of interesting things that can be opened up. Yeah.
We have interesting models and ways of decentralizing and kind of deregulating. And I think in the Trump era, those things will come back to the forefront because obviously this era of American politics is so hot button, and it makes like with the stuff about the filibuster. Like I'm amazed that they didn't ask Tim Walz about or have a filibuster question there, especially because that's been pretty.
And that's interesting because he's actually the vice president would actually preside over the Senate, so there's actually a reason to ask them about that, not ask the president. Yeah. The moderators
back me up on that.
The moderators aren't really smart, is what we learned from this video or from this debate or any debate really. Abortion though, there was a little bit of back and forth on the language that Tim Walz used in his bill for abortion. I don't really want to get into that; it's too technical. Also, I haven't read the bill, because I don't live in Minnesota. So there's that. Gun violence was big just because that moment where they were like talking to each other. But it happened a lot. But I think that was more potent just because that was Tim Walz's son that was in the shooting and everything. Not that he was shot, but in the shooting and all of that. And It's interesting just because J.D. Vance is such a different Republican, and I think this was like a really good platform for him to show that. Like, you go back to any vice presidential debate for at least since 2000, you're not going to have a candidate talking about child tax credits. You're not going to have a candidate talking about gun violence in a way that's like actually compassionate. You're not talking about, at least from the Republican side, you're definitely not going to have a Republican candidate talking about abortion, especially not Mike Pence, who was the vice presidential candidate before this, talking about abortion in a way that's like understandable, like logical. There's a lot of differences that he's pivoting on, and I think it was all good for him. And then we got to January 6th, which was the end of the debate. And I mean, they had a big healthcare debate too, which healthcare is definitely something that's it's that one's weird too, because JD Vance, you would think he definitely has he's definitely a little bit more, I guess, liberal than the average conservative on healthcare, just because like Appalachia, I mean, if we're looking at healthcare, Appalachia and then like us in the deep south, we're the ones that are really affected by healthcare costs at the worst. So it's like kind of an interesting topic for a lot of
really
Republicans.
Rural and really unhealthy. I mean, not like throwing shade in our home areas.
No, it's true, but yeah,
we are statistically more unhealthy than a lot of the country.
So there's a lot of interesting, like, there's a lot of senators that are kind of interesting on healthcare from the South and from the mid, like the East and everything. So, and then let's get to January 6th. This one was crazy. Tim Walz, they're talking about January 6th. I'm a little bit surprised that this didn't come up earlier, considering this is the vice presidential debate. And obviously with January 6th, the issue was that Mike Pence, the vice president at the time, had to certify the election, and the pressure was on him from the president, Donald Trump, to do that. So I was actually really surprised this didn't come up earlier, when more people will be watching the debate. But for J.D. Vance's sake, probably for the better that this didn't come up earlier, because the question was, the quote, "Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. It has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results?" And he had 2 minutes. And he said that he wants to focus on the future. By then, like at that point, there's no winning for J.D. Vance on this question. J.D. Vance has been, he's in the past said he wouldn't have certified it. That's not really a winning argument, because Trump did lose. And then at the same time, you have Donald Trump. We talked about this like at the beginning of the podcast, where he's just breathing down your neck to say that the one thing that Trump wants to hear, probably the one thing he believes in this election, is that he won 2020. And if he believes that, why is he running again, right? But I mean, this is like the one thing he has like a conviction in, it seems like, this election cycle. And you could just see J.D. Vance twist himself into knots trying to pivot the conversation back to Kamala Harris, and talking about manufacturing, and talking about
censorship,
and talking about bipartisanship too,
which is an issue, but like I don't think it's
not the same. Yeah, and then I'm trying to find the where's the one question? There's like the one line.
I mean,
there we go,
like right here. I think you and I can probably agree that I think like J.D. Vance, definitely thinks that Biden won the election. Like, I don't think J.D. Vance is actually an election denier.
I definitely think he does now. I think then he didn't. I think now he definitely does.
Do you think so? You think he's actually fully switched on that?
I think that, I mean, it clearly seems like he, at the time, he said that he wouldn't have certified his election results. I think that was during his Senate campaign. I don't know if I don't know what I don't really remember his Senate.
Well,
I didn't follow
it's tough
it,
because you don't know how much of it is kind of pandering.
Well, no, and that's what I was going to say, because J.D. Vance would probably not have, Trump endorsed him, and then he really shot up in the polls. And that it's not, he didn't win the election because of Trump, but he definitely was helped. Not like in the way Ron DeSantis literally won his governorship because of Trump. J.D. Vance was likely going to win, but it was going to be much closer. So I think he definitely owes. I don't know. I don't think that J.D. Vance thinks that Trump won. I definitely think he definitely thinks that Trump lost, and he knows that Trump lost. I think the problem is, like, the amount of influence you're going to lose in that administration if it happens, if you admit that, is awful. And I mean, I don't know. It sucks for him because it's really like an awful situation for him to be in. To like, what do you say in that situation? But like, I mean, well, there's clearly an answer. You should say. So the question was, where's the question? Okay, this is Tim Walz speaking. I would just ask that, did he lose the 2020 election? Talking about Trump. And then JD Vance's immediate quote, Tim, I'm focused on the future. And then he talked about censorship. Not the best pivot, but what good pivot is there, right? Like, what is good?
If you're not going to give that answer, there is no good pivot. So
there's nothing you can say. And I mean, and the election stuff is just stupid because, I mean, Trump's endorsements of all those Senate candidates in 2022, one, it definitely didn't help that the Roe v. Wade was overturned, but two, I mean, he every single person he endorsed, like Herschel Walker in Georgia, Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, Carrie Lake, Blake Masters, both in Arizona, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. The only one that won... Yeah, Adam Lexall. The only one that won was J.D. Vance. Like, literally the only person that won was J.D. Vance.
Ron Johnson, I guess?
I guess, but he's not even, like, he's just kind of there. And he was running it.
Can't compete in Michigan. John James, he lost for Senate, I think, twice, but I don't think
House.
He ran in 22, because he ran for the House.
He's in the House, yeah. People like John James. He seems like a rising star in the party.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no. Everybody that they ran in 2022 lost. I mean... Just about, except J.D. Vance, and Ohio's a red state.
It's kind of the same this time. I don't like.
It looks the same.
Honestly, I think it's good for Republicans that there isn't more publicity about how bad they're getting slaughtered, at least in polling down
in the
ballot.
Senate. Yeah, the Senate polling is awful.
And let me just say, from my last Senate forecast 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that this map would be the most generous map. It is. So of the three sections of the Senate that are
this
up
is the
every
best
time,
one, yeah.
This is the most pro-Republican one. It just is.
Yep.
In terms of your battlegrounds.
No,
I mean, you get Ohio. Republicans should be winning that 10 times out of 10. Pennsylvania, Casey only being up 4 is actually pretty decent, honestly, for Republicans, considering the Casey family in Pennsylvania are behemoths. I mean, they're giants in that state.
Exactly.
Montana finally pulling away is good. Baldwin and Slotkin only being up 3 is fine, but like President Biden, like.
But there's been a lot of variation in those polls to where, but in Baldwin and Slotkin's favor, like Baldwin's been up like 11 in incredible polls as recently as like when Kamala Harris was first anointed the nominee.
Yeah, well, and it shows how poor of a candidate Carrie Lake is.
She's awful. She's the worst candidate. She's so bad. I would be a better Senate candidate.
She's down 7.6 in polling to Gallego, and Gallego's a good candidate. Like, don't get me wrong.
Gallego's a good candidate.
A very competitive candidate.
Carrie Lake is incompetent.
And also, I kind of like Larry Hogan is down 7.5 in Maryland.
That's the one that one's interesting because they've been worried about that one. I think it's tough
because I think in a world without Trump, I think Larry Hogan is the next senator from Maryland.
I agree.
Like, I think if Trump doesn't exist, I think Hogan wins, but I think it's a struggle because I think also Hogan has campaigned on abortion and being, like, pro-abortion, but, like, he's kind of getting shot in the foot in that because no Republican's really going to win in a super liberal state on abortion.
Exactly,
you kind of have to he was governor. Like, he should just campaign on being governor.
Yeah, and he was a popular governor, and he just left the governor's mansion. And, well, hey, Wes Moore's pretty cool, too, actually. But back-to-back cool governors from Maryland. Good for them.
Good for Maryland.
Yeah, no, like, it's crazy. Like, Arizona is... Carrie Lake is genuinely such a bad... Ruben Gallego was up 11 points in the second to, like, most recent poll, Emerson poll. 11 points. And Gallego's really good on this because he's... This is not going to become a Senate forecast podcast. We're going to end this soon. But Gallego is I think he's a border rep. He's a Democrat. He's young. He speaks Spanish. He's a very harsh immigration hardliner, too. And he's been doing ads in, like, Spanish. He speaks Spanish, obviously. He's been doing ads in Spanish.
Republicans are doing better with Hispanic voters. I mean, that's just smart.
He's just better at this. I mean, this dude, Carrie Lake she is ridiculous. I'm sorry.
For context, Carrie Lake is polling almost 9.5 points below Trump in Arizona, by the way.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's not like Arizona's like a guaranteed Democratic pickup, but there might be a lot of split ticketing across the country because of these Senate races, which would be kind of cool. Honestly, it'd be unprecedented.
The return of split ticket voting.
I'm here.
I was also going to talk with you briefly about just vote. Like, I think voter apathy is actually on the rise. Like, of course, I've been giving Trump credit for increasing voter turnout for, basically his entire political career now. It almost seems like people are. Like, we've reached the end of that stage and people are just kind of tired.
Yeah, I don't think people care too. Like, this election was not. I thought it was going to be kind of crazy.
Like, I don't think it will break like the records of 2020 and how many people voted.
Like, what was it? 67%. That's very high. It's a high in today's country with the population. That's super high.
And Trump lost with like 76 or 77 million votes. Yeah, like, I think crazy. There was like a total of what you said, 167 million.
It was 67%, so it'd be like
67%. Yeah. I mean, there's probably what you figure almost 160 million people turned out to vote.
Let's look it up. Yeah, probably. I mean, Biden got 81 million. Trump got 74 million. Factor in, let's say, 5 million for other voters, and that's an easy.
160 million.
Yeah,
say
160 million. That's like half the country.
I don't think this election will top like 140.
Yeah, who knows? And I mean, there's a lot of issues in like North Carolina now with ballot access because of the hurricane, and then like. They've already started early voting, so we're having those ballots. A lot of issues, mainly with that, I think, but also like that could play into a part. I don't think it'll be that significant, like at least numerically wise. But I agree. I think apathy is definitely higher because you've kind of had a thing where it's like you had Trump, and then now you have the reverse of Trump. And so now it's like, what do you do? You know, now it's like you have Biden. I mean, you have Harris, but like there's not much of a difference, frankly, it's a little disappointing, frankly. You have an establishment Democrat, and then you have Trump again. And maybe the vice presidents are better, definitely better, I think, but frankly better than the candidates. But they're not going to really, you're not voting on a vice president. At least a sizable margin aren't voting on a vice president. So you have a lot of really weird issues. And then but at the same time, you have state, like you have issues that are very animating to people. Like you have abortion coming up. You have like Israel's conduct in the Middle East and the way they've been prosecuting their wars. And then you have Russia and Ukraine, but then you also have like economic like instability basically. So it's like it's weird because there's like low apathy, there's very high apathy, but there shouldn't be at the same time because there's a much more robust issue set, I think, in this election than there was in 2020 because 2020 was COVID. But I think in the long term, this election, like economically and then also like politically worldwide, is definitely more impactful. But I agree, like I don't think it's gonna have the same reach, which is very odd, right? It's very strange.
And I don't think a lot of people like actually understand how close this election is right now too. I mean,
it's very close. Yeah.
Like Trump and Harris are split like of the main battleground states, basically 3-3 with one tie. Trump leads in North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. Harris leads in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada, and it's a tie in Pennsylvania. Like, I would hate to actually be a professional forecaster and have this as my job, because how do you actually put all of your marbles behind like actually figuring out how this is going to go? Like, I'm glad that this is fun for us, because if this was actually my job to predict these things, like it's too close. It just is.
Yeah, the Nate Silver model, which is Nate Silver's the dude that started 538, and now he does his own stuff. He has Harris with a 57% chance of victory. But that's super close because, like, I mean, honestly, that's like a one-state tilt, and then we have Trump on like the other side. So his model is very in depth. If you want to look it up, it's Nate Silver. That's his name. Silver Bulletin is his Substack. Pretty interesting stuff. I do not subscribe. I do read his stuff though sometimes. I don't pay, but maybe I should. But anyways, it's very close, and I'm dropping a presidential forecast on Sunday. So for some of y'all, it'll be out by then, and you'll see just how close it is. I think it's actually tightened up since the last one, which I had Harris winning by like 30 electoral votes with tilt margins all over the map. It's a crazy election. I don't know. Closing thoughts. Veep debate. I think we both agree it's not going to matter. It's not going to move the needle.
But if it does matter, then it could change the election, honestly. Like,
that's a good point. It
didn't really matter, but it could really matter. Who knows?
I think J.D. Vance is leaving the real winner, not because for this election, but because they're not going to try to like coup him in the future. I think he definitely put a blueprint in for what the future of the Republican Party could be. And I think it's one that actually a lot of people could be excited by if they hear it more. So I think J.D. Vance is definitely the winner because he was pretty close to being basically thrown on the side of the road by the Republican establishment and everybody because he's been polling so low. But I think he performed very well and basically saved his skin. And he's only 40, so he has like 30 more years in this. And if this is a good start to
40, maybe.
Yeah, maybe 40. Who knows? Lord.
Based on others in power.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Bodeker, or anything?
Like my stomach is churning because it's making me nervous. I mean, I'm not like scared for like, oh, we're gonna all die, but like it's just who knows? It's kind of exciting too. Like
It's very fun.
this is, oh man.
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. Yeah, we'll go ahead and end it then. Thank you for listening. I don't even know. Presidential forecast coming out Sunday. We have a vice presidential. We have a debate recap in article form that's coming out soon as well. It's probably already out if you're by the time you're listening to this. So check those out. Follow us everywhere. It's best nonpartisan content on the internet. So thank y'all for listening. I'm Eshan Pokhrel.
I'm Michael Bodeker.
And goodbye.